Monday, April 15. Preparing for marriage. One of the greatest changes a person faces is when he or she gets married. Of course, not everyone gets married. After all, Jesus, our greatest example, never did, nor did many other Bible characters. Nevertheless, many people do marry, and thus the Bible is not silent about marriage, which is surely one of the greatest life changes. The first social arrangement mentioned in the Bible is marriage. For God, marriage is so important that the same words he told Adam and Eve in Eden about marriage appear in 3 other places in Scripture. Therefore, shall a man leave his father and his mother, and shall cleave unto his wife, and they shall be one flesh. Genesis 2, verse 24. We also see this in Matthew chapter 19 and verse 5. And said, For this reason a man shall leave his father and mother, and be joined to his wife, and the two shall become one flesh. And Mark 10, verse 7, For this reason a man shall leave his father and mother, and be joined to his wife, and the two shall become one flesh. And Ephesians chapter 5 and verse 31, For this reason a man shall leave his father and mother, and be joined to his wife, and the two shall become one flesh. These texts tell us that once a person gets married, the most important relationship in their lives should be between them and their spouse, even more than between them and their parents. Among the reasons marriage between a man and a woman is so important to God is that it typifies the relationship that exists between his Son, Jesus, and the church, his bride, as we read in Ephesians 5, verse 32. This is a great mystery, but I speak concerning Christ and the church. In constructing a house, one needs to stop and consider the cost, as we read in Luke chapter 14, verses 28 to 30. For which of you, intending to build a tower, does not sit down first and count the cost, whether he has enough to finish it, lest, after he has laid the foundation, and is not able to finish, all who see it begin to mock him, saying, This man began to build, and was not able to finish. Or what king, going to make war against another king, does not sit down first and consider whether he is able with 10,000 to meet him who comes against him with 20,000? How much more so when establishing a home? A house is built with brick and mortar, wood and iron, wires and glass, but a home is built with things that are not necessarily material. Question. What are some crucial traits that are important for all aspects of life, but are especially important for those preparing for marriage? 1 Corinthians 13, verses 4 to 8. Love suffers long and is kind. Love does not envy. Love does not parade itself, is not puffed up, does not behave rudely, does not seek its own, is not provoked, thinks no evil, does not rejoice in iniquity, but rejoices in the truth, bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things. Love never fails. But whether there be prophecies, they will fail. Whether there are tongues, they will cease. Whether there is knowledge, it will vanish away. And Galatians chapter 5, verses 22 and 23. But the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, long-suffering, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, self-control. Against such there is no law. Preparation for marriage must begin with us personally and individually. At the same time, we need to look carefully at our future spouse to see if he or she would be a good complement for us. Is he or she a hard worker? Proverbs 24, verse 30 has something to say about that. I went by the field of the lazy man, and by the vineyard of the man devoid of understanding. And there it was, all overgrown with thorns. Its surface was covered with nettles. Its stone wall was broken down. When I saw it, I considered it well. I looked on it and received instruction. A little sleep, a little slumber, a little folding of the hands to rest. So shall your poverty come like a prowler, and your need like an armed man. Does he or she have a bad temper? Proverbs 22:24. Make no friendship with an angry man, and with a furious man do not go. Do we share common beliefs? 2 Corinthians chapter 6, verses 14 and 15. Do not be unequally yoked together with unbelievers. For what fellowship has righteousness with lawlessness? And what communion has light with darkness? And what accord has Christ with Belial? Or what part has a believer with an unbeliever? How do my family and friends feel about my future spouse? Proverbs chapter 11 and verse 14. Where there is no counsel, the people fall, but in the multitude of counselors there is safety. Am I relying on faith or on feelings alone? Proverbs 3, 5 and 6. Trust in the Lord with all your heart, and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge him, and he shall direct your paths. The answers to these questions can mean a future of happiness or a lifetime of sorrow. So, to finish today, think about some good marriages. What principles do you find there that could be applied to other kinds of interpersonal relationships as well? You have been listening to a reading of the Adult Sabbath School Bible Study Guide by Dr. Percy Harold from Queensland, Australia. This service is brought to you by Hope Channel, the Sabbath School Department, and Christian Services for the Blind. Remember, God is always faithful.